living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Well, let's see if I can manage to get all the proper buttons pushed today. It's kind of important. I think it is. Welcome to the show. It's Toward Anarchy. I am your host, Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's my pleasure to do this. We do this every Sunday, get together here across the Republic Broadcasting Network and have a conversation. It's really just that simple. There's no big surprises. I'm not a big news guy. I'm not trying to fill you in on what's going on in the world or get your attention with sensationalist news stories and the latest shooting. I'm just here to chat and have a little bit of fun and try to make a little bit of sense of some of these things that we deal with on a daily basis. I'm talking about the world that we live around, that we live in, that's around us, and today is one of those days where I get to have one of these conversations about anarchy, about voluntarism, about these ideas that are key and core to the show, but not necessarily something that we're constantly talking about. It's not a constant talking point. I kind of let it speak for itself. We wander back and forth through the ideas as we talk about other things that interest me, things that I find interesting and I think might interest you. It's no big secret, no special formula, just myself and a microphone, and I'm lucky that I happen to have a Republic Broadcasting Network behind me to do it all and to talk about some of these things that are politically important. People listening across the network needing a different view, something other than the left versus right false paradigm, that false reality that exists. It's a little box that we live in, and if your only solution to the problems of government, either created by government, exacerbated by government, or just of government itself, if your only solution to those problems is to change sides in the debate, then you don't really offer any solution at all. You're not really helping out the cause at all. The reason that it's such a great opportunity today to talk about these things when it's always an opportunity to talk about them is just because of a different reach. I come here every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time live and talk about these things and talk to the people across the network. And it's the audience grows and changes, but I have a core audience there, and they're the people that I'm speaking to every week. And we always hope that somebody new hears the ideas and takes something away from it and maybe pick up some new listeners. That's always a nice idea. But there's a bigger audience out there, of course, that we're still trying to reach. And when we step outside of our circles, step outside of these normal areas that we find ourselves in, and look for different people and different topics to have different conversations, which is what I've been doing for some time now, just trying to find different avenues to reach people and find these conversations and just talk about things and hopefully have that underlying conversation about anarchy and a voluntary existence just sort of seep through to people as we're talking about other things. But today, having that extra audience some people that are going to, whether they're listening live or whether they'll tune into the podcast later, the replay of the show, will be tuning in for the first time because they want to hear what my guest has to say. And my guest today is Matt Hawkins. He's the COO and President of Top Cow Productions. And Top Cow is one of the creator houses under the Image Comics label, and has been for 30 years. They're all celebrating Image Comics. The whole family is sort of celebrating their 30-year anniversary this year. And so it's a great time to talk to them, to talk about them, talk with somebody like Matt, because he's not just a comic book guy. He's not just a creator of these fantastic pieces of art. He's also a businessman, and he's been at the heart of significant change and a significant attitude shift in the comic book industry 30 years ago. A big shift when individual creators stood up for themselves and their properties and said, we're not going to be pushed around by the big two at the time, Marvel and DC. To this day, this is something I'm sure Matt and I will get into here when he joins the conversation here in a few minutes. To this day, there are still creators, big name creators of massive hit characters that are still trying to get their piece, their share from these, the big two mostly, as far as that goes. I mean, everything changed when Image and Top Cow and Extreme and these individuals who created those creator houses and those production companies to produce their own works, they changed the industry. They took a huge leap forward, and they're still doing so today. So there is some wonderful conversation there with the guest, but there's that opportunity then to reach out to those people that have come to hear what my guest has to say. And it's a chance. I have their ear. It's a chance for me to be a good steward for the ideas and the values that I say I uphold and that I believe are important. And well, here, let's clear this up right away, because this is something that some people still don't get. It takes a episode or two, and I guess that's the subtlety of it all. And it appears to work. People are listening because they're listening to the content, and those other ideas are sinking in slowly. That's what we hope for. That's the best we can hope for. And so we have this whole underlying idea of what the show is about and what Anarchy is about and how it should apply in any sort of real world sense. We're not getting rid of the government tomorrow. So Anarchy, as I see it, it's not about any push to necessarily remove government so much as it is to free your state of mind about authority. Authority is this illusion. There's this illusion that authority exists, and that somehow through magical ceremonies, voting boxes, and hero worship, we can somehow change the moral actions of individuals or the immoral actions of individuals, things that would otherwise be forbidden, and turn them into a moral collective pursuit. So that's what voting is to the anarchist. That's what democracy is to the anarchist. So the show Toward Anarchy is not, if you're tuning in, you think, oh, well, this guy's talking about anarchy and the dangers of it, and we're about to slip off into anarchy. We're hearing every day about these shootings, and it's all over the press, and our government is supporting wars and waging wars and spending our money and sending us into debt, and the economy is crashing, and gas is $7 a gallon in places on the West Coast and East Coast, and it's $5 a gallon here in some places in the middle of the country. And so there's a lot going on in terms of our whole reality, but it's this weird mixed sense of who's in charge of it all. And I believe, as an anarchist, that it's a good thing that individuals, people, be responsible for themselves and for their property and for their management of their own lives. And I realize that there are people that aren't capable of that. And okay, so that's a thing. That's fine. But there are plenty of people who are willing to help. There doesn't need to be a big daddy. That doesn't have to happen. There doesn't need to be somebody who says, well, this is the way we have to do things. And there's proof of that, because we live in anarchy daily. This would be my argument for anarchism. And that's not chaos. It's not the same thing as chaos. Anarchy is no rulers. That's it. It's not no rules. It's not no hierarchies. It's not chaos. It's not without form or structure. It's just the idea that no one is a better authority in your life and should be making decisions for you but you, or someone that you voluntarily give over that right, that power, that strength to as a ward or a protector. You can do that. You could theoretically have a voluntary government. It's a theory. I don't know that it's ever really happened. I'm sure it has on smaller scales. The bigger the scale, the harder it is to do. That was part of the reason why our own system was set up the way it was, why the founders created it the way they did. It was supposed to be individual-centric and small, community-centric. The power of a vote being so much more important on the small scale than on the bigger scale. Voting for the people in your community to manage things and work out the daily grind of government and the business of the state. You have an influence, you have a say, the smaller that scale. And as futile or as mathematically ridiculous as it might be, a perfect example here in Kansas, one of the most recent elections, there's a small town not too far from here, and there was 101 people voting, and it was literally 51-50. That was the vote. It wasn't even 51-49. It was 51-50. There was just that one other person to tip the scale, and so literally half the town was taking the other half of the town's money to put at this project. I don't even remember what it was it was just one of those funny things, because you don't necessarily see it on that small scale, is see how important or how unimportant, depending on your point of view, your vote is. So I'm not concerned that we're slipping off into anarchy. I'm worried that we're not working toward enough anarchy. Anarchy exists all around us every day. It's the natural state. We don't rule over each other. We work together to build what we have here. I would say that we've done so in spite of the system, in spite of the government, these things that have crept up and into our lives and taken over and sort of rob us and try to cage us and live off of us, survive off of us, not unlike a leech stuck to us. These are all colorful ways of really saying that you and I, most people, we get along daily, and we do so without the need for or the consideration of the opinion of authority or the presumed authority, the people that put themselves in charge. And they really do put themselves in charge when you start breaking down the idea of voting and what your vote actually means. And especially when you're talking about these congressmen, these people in Washington, the president, these figures that have a big influence on the rest of the world, and we play it off as some sort of game almost. It's like a game. Oh, well, roll the dice, flip the coin is really a better example. Flip the coin and you'll see if things turn out a little bit better this time. But they never really do. We continue down this same destructive path. These parties that pretend that they're different have the same core failed ideas at the center of them. That's the theft of our wealth and the redistribution of our wealth for their means, for their constituency, for whatever little program or problem that some small group of people has pointed out to them and said, well, hey, we need to solve this problem. These people can't take care of themselves. These people shouldn't have one of those, shouldn't be doing that. Well, let's pass a law. Let's set a tax. Let's take some money. Let's build a bridge. Let's do all of these things that seem like perfectly reasonable things to do when we're individuals, when we have choice, when you and I are the ones that are making the decision about how our money is spent, how our wealth is spent, what the things, the energy that we put into creating the things that we want and what we get back out of them. But we're not at the center of that. It's just a big joke that our participation in the greater sense of our society political movement, the government, is a joke. It's an entrenched system and has been for many, many decades. Even if you don't believe that the whole thing has been corrupt from the beginning, certainly there are points in history that you can go back and you can point to. I go back as far as the 11th Amendment. That's the first piece of paper, official piece of paper that I can point back to that really changes the relationship between the state and the individual from what the founders of the nation really had in mind, and that smaller, controllable government. Even after the Federalists sort of won their little battle, and the government was centralized, and the Constitution was written in, some little piece of paper that nobody follows anymore, nobody really understands, really helped change that paradigm of the people and the state. And then by the time the 11th Amendment comes along, we're not even people anymore, we're citizens. So there are points at history that you can look back and you say, well, there was a significant difference in what we thought was going on and what is really going on. And it's become, the whole system itself is it no longer needs us. It's like the people who say my team won when they're talking about the football game. No, you didn't. And they didn't even need you to watch. They were still going to play the game. They're still going to make the money. People will still fill the stadium stands, but they don't even need you in particular. Ouch. We got to go into a break. We'll come back. I'll tell you a little bit more, and we'll add Matt to the conversation. There is, every week, you can always follow along with the show and follow along with the topic and catch up, find out more about the guest. because I will create a little page to keep such information out there on the internet and make it available to you. It's at towardanarchy.com. If you're live with me, it'll be real easy. You'll see right there on the front page, June 5th, Matt Hawkins, President and COO of Top Cow. Just click that link, and it'll take you to the page. There's a link there that'll take you to topcow.com. You can find out more about the amazing creators and titles under the Top Cow banner. Grab some free digital issues of Matt's books, as well as many of the other creators there. Just some great titles. Witchblade, fantastic. They made a television show out of that one for a little bit there. Warframe. Just there's so many great, amazing titles there, and there's the free comic. You can get introduced to it. There's free digital comics. It's a fantastic idea, just to try to give people a taste of what you might look forward to. I encourage you to check out Matt's books for certain, especially the Tithe and Postal and Think Tank. Those are my favorites from him. But he has, I don't know, probably 35, 36 titles, something like that, of his own creation. There's also a link there to the Top Cow merchandise store. That's what I do. I throw some links up there for my guests. But then I also add a couple other things in there, just some things that you might find interesting, some things that I found interesting during the week, usually just a couple of links. This one was great. This was part of a Sci-Fi Channel documentary about Image Comics and their impact on the industry. If you're interested in how they really, all these guys, Matt and all the others running around in their circle right there 30 years ago, and what they did for the industry and for individual creators, it's huge, and it makes them legends. You know, these guys will be up there with the greatest when my generation's books are all written, when the names have been taken down. Matt's will be up there, Image Comics will be up there, Top Cow will be up there, and it's great to see. They deserve it. But that it's a YouTube documentary, so it just anybody can watch it. Just click that link. It's called So Much Damage, and there's a couple episodes of it. And then there was this other neat thing that I had just come across, just in the last minutes of putting the page together, as I do every week. And this was just an article about DC in concert, is what it's called, and you can experience a live orchestral performance of the soundtrack of the movie that you're watching. So you can go watch a DC movie, you know, Justice League or something like that, Batman versus Superman, whatever you want to watch, the Joker, fantastic, and be there with a live presentation of the music. I think that was kind of neat. And there's always some more information there as well at towardanarchy.com. I share a link, and I share a meme image of some sort, and this page also is where all of the replays and the archive can be found. The stream that goes out over all the myriad of places that you can find the show afterward. All of this is there, and it all derives from that spot. The same MP3 that you could go and listen to there in any of the episodes, any of the previous episodes of the show at towardanarchy.com, or the same MP3 that feeds the stream that you would listen to if you listen to it on, I don't know where you listen to your stuff, Spotify. We're there. We're on the big satellite radios, and we're there. We're everywhere. But this particular meme image is one of my favorites because it's comic book related, and I just love it. I found it not too long ago, just going through back issues of comic books in the store, and it was on the cover of an issue of Cerebus, the comic by Dave Sim, and it's just it harkens back to the day when the Comics Code Authority existed, and you would put a stamp on your comic book. in some cases it was a real stamp, and then it became just an image of a stamp. It looks like a stamp, and it would basically be that this comic book was okay for consumption, because comic books were, they started as, in many ways, as a way to disseminate information that wasn't mainstream, as a lot of these things do, and they still are to this day, in that sense, an underground medium, a way of telling stories and producing images and thoughts and ideas that aren't mainstream and aren't acceptable. And the Comics Code Authority made it so you knew. It's like the PMRC with the warning labels on the music. It's the same thing. Well, this one in particular that Dave Sim had on the cover of one of his Cerebus books, it says, "Approval is an authoritarian construct." Absolutely true. We will come right back and add Matt Hawkins to the conversation.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Okay, go to towardanarchy.com if you'd like to follow along. Just look for June 5th. If you're not with us live, just click the episodes button up there at the top. Look for 2022 and June 5th, and you'll see, as I was mentioning, Matt Hawkins, President and COO of Top Cow Productions, one of the core creator houses in the Image Comics family. He's my guest today. There's a link there for topcow.com, and as well as a link to the Top Cow store. Just a little something. I like the idea of sharing the Top Cow link, because if you go there and you're really interested in finding out more about sequential storytelling and comic books and the history of comic books, I think all of those things are fun and fantastic and neat. But what you can really find there is free copies of comic books, and you can get interested in some of these stories, and I encourage you to do so. I think there's comic books have had for many years this weird sort of stigma about them as being something for kids, something for children, and it's never really shook that. And even with the introduction of the MCU and its impact on movies in the last 20 years, in movies that they've been messing around with creating this universe and introducing the mainstream to comic books, it's still taken as well. It doesn't get its respect that the big movie guys making fun of the Marvel movies. It's a thing. It happens. But there are many reasons to respect and understand what the importance of comic books historically and currently. And there are people who are at the center of making that a reality, and Matt Hawkins has been one of those people for 30 years at the center of this. Helped come along at a time when the industry took its biggest change since the superhero itself was introduced to the industry. So it's a real pleasure to get a chance to talk to my guest, Matt Hawkins. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thanks for having me. And I have to say, when you show that picture, my promo picture there, I was 40 and now I'm 52. I'm not quite as buff as I once was, and it makes me feel a little sad, actually. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, man.
Well, you know what? It's an interesting thing, because you're a well-respected guy. You've been in this industry for a long time. You have, 3 dozen of your own titles you've helped create. You've helped launch uncounted titles and creators into the industry. And if you search out Matt Hawkins out there, there's you and there's a poker player. And so there's not a lot of images of Matt Hawkins out there to choose from.
Right.
I really, you have been at it a long time. So there are a lot of images, and you signed a lot of books, and you've helped launch a lot of creators. And I thought it was really great when you when you actually responded. There's a lot of times you got to go through a lot of gates and jump through a lot of hoops to get a chance to talk to somebody. So I appreciate you being personable about it and really handling your business.
Well, I like to come on these shows and and talk to people because every one of these shows always has its core audience of fans, and most of these people probably never heard of me before, and they might not be familiar with the work. And I get to come on and talk about what I do, and I love what I do, and hopefully they try some of it.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting show because it's something political. We're talking about the anarchy thing, and it's an underlying topic and of conversation in the show. But a lot of the show is about artistic pursuit and creative pursuits and finding ways to for people to go ahead and pursue your thing. If you love art, if you love creating, whatever it is, please do that. Make yourself happy, but then try to find also ways to get it out to people and to monetize it as far as that goes. And you, as a creator and as a businessman, a front office man for all these years, it's another great match for a conversation.
Well, I think it's interesting. There's only a handful of us that straddle sort of the business and creative sides. Most people are on one or the other. And I actually think it's been a tremendous benefit for me my whole career because I've always kind of understood the business of it. I think there's a lot of people who do it because it's a hobby or that's fun or they always wanted to, and they don't necessarily understand the business of it. And I can't tell you how many comics I've seen come and go in this industry that I thought were fantastic. But because they didn't find an audience, they didn't know how to market it, they didn't know how to properly get themselves out there, go to conventions, the comics quickly die. It's kind of a cutthroat business, really, and it's very hard to get someone to try something new by someone they've never heard of.
Oh yeah, as a shop owner and somebody who's collected myself for years, I see it all the time, and the best that we can hope for is this. It's those personal conversations because it's the same thing that we do in the store. Somebody comes in, we ask them, what's your poison? You into comics? You into Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it is. We have all these things, but then we start having the conversation. Well, here's the $2 bin, and here's
Right.
the new stuff, and these guys are really hot right now, and this artist is great, and this is a great story. It's those personal conversations and those personal opinions about the work that get people to pick them up.
Yeah, it is definitely on the floor at a convention or at a comic book store. It's whoever they talk to that's trying to hand sell them something and say, hey, you should try this. I mean, I look at what I watch on TV and go see in movies now. It's almost always stuff that family or friends recommend to me, or I see online someone talking about it. There's just so little time to really spend, enjoying this stuff. I don't want to waste my time, and there's a lot of bad stuff out there too. So navigating through that is difficult. It's one of the reasons why, I mean, like you mentioned on topcow.com on the free comics tab, there's over 6,000 pages of free comics there. Awesome. 6,000 pages. And a lot of those are complete volumes of long arcing runs of books. Like I do a book called Postal and Think Tank. The first volumes of both those series are up there. The entire first graphic novel. You can read 128 pages of it for free to see if you're into it. Because the last thing I want is for someone to buy my book, read it, not like it, and never read my stuff again. Because I write different kinds of stuff for different audiences, and I am a firm believer in sampling. It's one of the reasons why we do it.
Yeah, and it's worked out really well, and it's funny because there was a big to do this week about Comic Book Day, about Free Comic Book Day. People are. Some people are a little bit upset about the idea that these comic books come out, they're released on this Free Comic Book Day, and that they're geared toward, originally they were geared toward trying to bring new people in, but they've sort of drifted over to catering to people who are already in the store, that are already coming in and expect to get those books and pick them up. Maybe you can speak to this, being in this industry and being an outsider, insider. It's a fantastic position to be in. We've watched the industry grow a little bit over the last 20 years with the MCU and all the comic book movies that have come out, but it hasn't really, as a shop owner, I haven't seen it. It hasn't really translated into people coming back into the store. So we're still having to have these same conversations about the books and about the more important aspects of what comic books mean to people.
Yeah, I think that's it's a truism, because I do San Diego Comic-Con. It's coming up next month. It's our big, holy grail mecca of the year. And 99% of the people that will walk by our booth, it's very expensive to set up and very expensive to be there. And we spend a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort to do it. 99% of the people that walk by our table have no interest in comics whatsoever. And it's one of the reasons why I prefer shows like New York Comic Con, where they have a separate artist alley, or you have some comic book stores where they show some of the smaller ones I actually like a lot better. I've been to several of the shows in your neck of the woods, the Comic Palooza. I've been to, Fan Expo Dallas. I've been to a number of shows. And I remember going to the Anarchy back in San Antonio in 1995. I used to go to the Larry Lankford Dallas Fantasy Fairs when he would wear his purple pants. I remember that guy. And so, there's been a lot of history of shows and all these sort of things. But it's actually very difficult to get someone who's only there because they like the movies or the films or the television. It's very difficult to get them to read. As a father of two grown sons, I have a 20 and 22-year-old son. They don't read, and it kind of drives me nuts. And I don't know what to do about it. You look at most of the people who are reading my Postal and Think Tank and these kind of books are 40 to 60-year-old men.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Swing and the Sunstone, which is sort of some more romance category, a completely other animal, which I can't believe I even write these days. But those are middle-aged women, and those are the ones who come up to me at the booth at the shows, and they'll come up to see me there, and they want to hang out and talk. And I think that's one of the great things about the comic book industry. With the conventions, you can get to know the creators. You can walk up and talk to them for 15, 20 minutes. And the thing is, if you go see Chris Hemsworth at the Fan Expo Dallas, you're going to get 15 seconds of his time.
Yeah.
You can come talk to me for 15 minutes, and if I'm bored and there's no one hanging out, you can talk to me for an hour. I've talked to people no, I'm serious. There are some people that do comics when they do conventions, they'll go down and they'll sign for an hour and a half because they want to get the 30 people line or 40 people line. So it looks like they have a line, it's an ego boost. It is an ego boost. I'm not going to lie. But I've found in the course of my career that being there all day, every day, allows me to meet and greet and create new fans. And you need 10,000 hardcore fans to make a good living in this business. And I have achieved those with the books that I sell. And I have a very good living, and it's hard. It's not easy to do because so many people do conventions wrong. I can't tell you how often I'm at a convention, even a small convention, and I do very well. And I see people that are all around me, they're complaining about how horribly they're doing. But these are guys or girls or whoever they are. They're sitting there with their head in their phone, their faces down, they got their arms crossed, their body language is all bad. And, and I wouldn't want to talk to them, would you? So if you ever come up to me at a booth, unless I'm just exhausted, I'll be standing, I'll be looking around, I'll be smiling at people. And I often will just sit there and say, hello, hi, how you doing? Hey, nice shirt. Oh, that's a cute cosplay. I'll just do stuff like that, honestly, because it's kind of boring to stand there just and stare off into space for all that time. So I try to start conversations. I also hate the kiosk level heavy salespeople. You know what I mean? Like, hey, here's my book. You want to be a Cyberforce right here. You like science fiction? You need to read this book right now. It's only $1.99. That shit drives me nuts. It drives everybody nuts, right? And you see that sometimes, and there are some people that are good at that. But for the most part, my soft sell is, hey, do you read comics? And if a guy walks by and kind of looks at me and keeps walking, I'm like, what do I care? I'll talk to the next guy. Next guy comes by, next girl comes by, I'll say, hey, do you read comics? And I usually do that if they linger for a second or if they look at the art, and I'll be like, oh, do you like comics? Do you read comics? And if they say yes, I'll usually follow it up with, what do you read?
What do you read?
Yeah. If they say I love Spider-Man, I love Batman, I said, oh, what do you like about it? And I try to open that conversation and that dialogue, because it's just like, I learned this in my 20s. When you're at a bar and you're trying to talk to a girl, you need to get past that initial ice barrier, right? Once you get past that ice barrier of, please don't talk to me, leave me alone, and you get into a conversation, that's what you want. You can sort of open up on a human level and chat with people. And often I will direct people if they tell me what they like. And when people come to my booth and they say they only like superheroes, I'll be like, well, I got to be honest, I'm not sure I have much for you. Yeah, I don't really write superheroes. The only thing I have in sort of that category to me might be Cyberforce or Rising Stars, if I have it there with me. When I'm doing a table by myself, I don't often have a lot of the other Top Cow stuff. I just have my stuff. But if there's a Top Cow booth like a San Diego or New York, I'll have Rising Stars, I'll have Midnight Nation, I'll have other books that are superhero friendly. The only thing I've written even somewhat in that genre is probably Aphrodite 9, that book I did with Cedric, which is sort of these transhumanistic superhumans. And I try to turn them on to that. And, they're into it or they're not. And I usually, one thing I recommend heartily, and I wish I had one right here, I could show you. Post-pandemic, everyone knows how to use a QR code.
Oh, right.
So, so giving out a free comic, like if I would hand out, like these cost what, 50 cents a piece to make. So if I would hand these out, ultimately it would be expensive over time. But if you make a little postcard or a little business card with a QR code on it that has a digital download and links directly to one of those books that's on topcow.com, I'll say, oh, what kind of books do you like? You like Postal? Here's things. Hey, try this. I'll give them the card and I'll say, hey, you might get stuck in a line. I mean, you're going to go sit over there and stand in a line for an hour and a half, right? Read it on your phone. Come back.
Yeah, right.
Read it on your phone. Let me know what you think. And it works. People come back, and usually at the end of those days, people come back and they buy stuff from me and they talk to me. And I think people appreciate the more soft kind of sell. I mean, the whole, Joe Isuzu sales technique. Oh, wow, that really probably dated me, huh? But that sort of hard salesman kind of tactic that everybody hates, I mean, I just can't do that. I see people do it, and I see people doing it successfully. And honestly, I'm a little envious sometimes when I see them do it.
Yeah.
That's just not me.
Yeah.
I have a conversation. I tell them this is what I do, and they either like it or they don't.
Yeah, that works. I mean, that fits. It really does, because this is it's all about a voluntary existence for me, for the people that listen to this show, the people that want to hear me talk about anarchy. People get the wrong impression. They think that angry white guy presentation, I'm going to start screaming about woke people and this, that, and the other thing. And I have all my problems, just like anybody does, with all of that nonsense that's going on and the manipulation of reality for the sake of somebody's feelings. And I have all these conversations and ideas and thoughts about these as well. But what I really want to do is have just conversations with people and talk to them about what they like and because the way you're talking about how the conversation progresses in steps and stages, and that is something that you have to learn and you have to practice. And even someone like myself, who's been a communicator, but mostly a one-way communicator for my life, 20 some odd years, almost 30 years now doing this. Boy, and I dated myself too. We find ourselves questioning our ability to speak to people, and is it working? When you said the thing about watching people do the hard sell, I'm the same guy. I have business partners, and one of my business partners in the comic book shop, he's the hard sell guy. He is right there. The second the guy comes through the door, he's asking where he's from, where'd you hear about us, what can I get you, did you see this, have you tried this one? He's on it, and he does well at it. And I'm just not that guy. I'm the same guy. I like to plant the seeds and the ideas. I like to tell you, here's what I do. Here's what works for me. Here's what I enjoy. Maybe you'd like it too.
Yeah. And, I use that in my editorial style too, because I work with a lot of writers and artists, and especially with writers, we all have very fragile egos, as you may have noticed online. I working with writers, I have learned that as an editor, the best way I can get a writer to ultimately do what I want is to convince them that it's his or her own idea. You know what I mean? And so what I do is I ask a lot of questions.
Yes.
Ask a lot of questions. What is the tone of this book? Where are you going with this? What is this character's motivation? Why is he doing that? And a lot of time you can see in their eyes, they have no idea.
They don't know.
What I mean? They don't know. But, and to some of them's credit, they will actually, say, I don't know. You know what I mean? Or, what do you think?
Okay,
But the vast majority don't do that. They'll say, oh, and they come up with stuff on the fly. And I'm always pleasantly surprised that some of the greatest stuff comes up on the fly. Because you're just sort of in the moment, you're a little nervous, your adrenaline's rushing, and because no one likes to get notes. I mean, as a writer, I've worked on a lot of licensed properties and video games and things, and no one likes to get notes. I still get notes. I actually pay people that will give me notes that I will listen to, like Brian Hill and Brian Cady and a few others, Elena Salcedo, because the problem I've had is most of these people I pay. So therefore, they don't necessarily always give me the best notes because they don't want to piss me off. And that's exactly what I don't need. You don't need yes people around you. You need people that tell you this sucks and this is why. And for me, I always tell people, write the notes. I don't want them verbally. Write the notes, email me to them, because my reaction to when I get notes like that is always, screw you. Who do you think you are? And then, a couple hours later, it starts to sink in. And then the next day, I'll go back and I'll rewrite it.
Yeah, yeah. You go back and look at it again, and the criticism is tough, and that, it's something that artists and creators need to learn to deal with. We need to learn to communicate. We need to learn to take criticism, and we need to learn to market ourselves. And that's awesome because we all have our favorite things that we want to do. We have our favorite creations, which I have to ask you some geek questions. Um,
Sure.
who's your who's your favorite character of yours? Is it David? I mean, is that an obvious answer?
Yeah, I think it's David Lauren. I was actually sad when I ended the fifth volume because I ended it in a way where he finally had his own family, but that was very reflective of my father and his experience in the military. And my
Oh,
dad was an engineer, and my physics background that I never used, and so a lot of that was a very personal story. And I have to
yeah.
say, most of my friends that read that book say that when they hear David talking in their mind, they hear my voice, which kind of weirds
Right.
me out because I'm no super genius guy. And I sort of struggled at the end of my physics education. So I was not the one that was sailing through with ease.
Yeah, but
So
did you necessarily struggle because you couldn't do the work, or because you had this? I Creatives get this. Is is being a creative person a valuable thing? Smart people are supposed to be valuable to society. We're supposed to take our intelligence and produce something great that mankind can really live on, survive on, takes us into the next generation. And but is that comic books? I
right.
personally think that they are absolutely. I think the sequential storytelling, I think the art, them by themselves speaks for itself because it tells about history. It tells about the time that it's being created. It does everything that any other medium in that sense can do as far as getting a story and people be getting what they want out of it. If they want more, they can get more. They can go after it. But then you look at the people who create, people like yourself, and the struggles, the ideas, those people, those individuals, they mirror us, and creativity exists in this weird plane, on this weird plane where people think that it's unachievable if they themselves haven't found their own creative outlet. And so you get the idea of music prodigies. I play 5 musical instruments, and I draw and I write and I do all these different things. And so I try to tell people, do it. Just if you think you want to do it, if you think you want to play an instrument, if you think you want to write a comic book, if whatever it is, just take the leap and do it. And then, hopefully, maybe you have some of these tools going in already. If not, create, do your thing, make your beauty and your art, and then learn how to make it work for you, make some money for you, make it be able to sustain your existence.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing actually to say that. And one of my things when you talk about like I've always tried to entertain, but also clandestinely educate. That's why I put
Mm.
like the science classes in the back of my books. With Postal, I really sort of studied like mental illness and anxiety and Asperger's syndrome and autism, and these things were all sort of looked into. And I'm fascinated by all these things. My mantra for writing has always been to write what I want to know. Everyone always says write what you know. I that to me is boring. If I already know it, I don't want to write about it. I want to write stuff I want to know about. So when I started writing Postal, I did not know much about autism or Asperger's, and so I did a tremendous amount of research. And Brian Hill helped me a lot with that. And we went in and we watched YouTube videos of autistic people talking. And we talked to neuroscientists and various things like that, and really tried to focus in on some of the more interesting aspects of it. And when I was in the science program, you run into a lot of people on the spectrum, and I was at UCLA,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah. I it was all kinds of crazy stuff in there, and some of these people had some really interesting like social skills or lack of them. And some of these guys I still am friends with, and they're working for Raytheon, for Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, and some of them in their military. And I have a network of guys that I went to school with that I still chat with on a regular basis. Like when I did the clock, I referenced an old fraternity brother of mine who's an immunotherapist now, and I sort of peppered him with questions of, I want to write a story about the weaponization of cancer. cancer, and how people could use cancer to thin the herd of population of the world. How would that be done? Is that even possible? And, when I ask questions like that, I usually get sort of this dead look from behind, like, what's wrong with you? I even went to some neuroscience or something or biotech seminar here in Los Angeles where I asked that question about the weaponization of cancer. And there was just this dead silence in this room. It was hilarious. And I explained, I'm a comic book writer and I'm writing this, that, and the other thing, no. And then suddenly they wanted to talk to me. But there was this weird moment where, is this guy a terrorist? Last thing we want to do is give a terrorist more and better information on how to kill everyone,
That's hilarious. It's funny because you say that and their impression of it, their reception of that question, I got the exact opposite from my audience. They just went, "What? What did he say?" The weaponization of cancer. Let me tell you. Here's a website for you. That's one of the things that I loved. I came across Think Tank, of course, and as a lot of people do, they find themselves liking David and find something of themselves in David. And for listeners who don't know, David is a really smart guy. And he's recruited by the system at a young age. And so he's been developing technologies and tools and things that the system has been using to kill people. And he has a conscience problem. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. We're going into a break. We'll pick this up on the other side. It's just the top of the hour real quick. And we will come right back with Matt Hawkins. All right, we are off into hour number 2. Go to towardanarchy.com, as always, to follow along. Look for June 5th. You'll see Matt Hawkins is my guest. And just before we went into the top of the hour, we just started to broach the topic of Think Tank and David Loren and the ideas that are contained within. Because Matt, there you mentioned including real information at the back of the books, and this was one of the things that super intrigued me about your work in finding, sort of getting to the last page, and then, well, it's not the last page. Look at this. Well, what is this? This is a link. This is links inside the comic book that say, here, go visit this if you want to find out more about what I just talked about on these pages. This is a real thing. This was a fantastic thing for me because as someone who's fully aware of this sort of destructive nature of the state and what it does with our money and our wealth and what it's doing around the world, to find something like Think Tank and find a place in it and find it to be so real and so well thought out and such a solid view of what you would think somebody in that position would go through, just that crisis of conscience and realizing, oh, the things that I've been doing for all these years have contributed to death and destruction around the world. What do I do about it? How do I change this? How do I change who I am? So that's a pretty neat thing to have introduced across a comic book. Most people think of comic books as sort of Archie and Superman's. It's this kid's game that it's been this misunderstanding for a long time. When I first started picking up comic books, I picked up Watchmen. I picked up V for Vendetta. I was an early teen at the time those books came out, and those were just so vastly different from X-Men, Spider-Man. They had such deep characters, and there was so much more meaning to them, and that spoke to me and made me a better reader of comic books and consumer of the information that they have to provide. But it also gave me, the Dark Knight series and Watchmen in particular, because of their sort of pictures of the television, and I just saw that image on my real television, and they just had that in the comic book, and they're talking about it, and they're talking about it in this real sense. And it told me, it was one more thing along my development as a youth that told me that authority was just kind of full of it, that they had all of these preconceived notions about things like Dungeons and Dragons and smoking pot and reading comic books that are just so far off from what the truth is about them. And so getting a chance to have a conversation like this with you, Matt, and your experience in the industry and your age being similar to my own, very close in that respect. We've grown up in the same world and seen some of the same changes, and sort of pick up those pages and see, wow, there's somebody else that kind of sees some of these same things. That happens, and it doesn't just happen to me. It happens to people across the industry, and it's how I think we have to continue to grow the industry, because is it a struggling industry? Is there a future for comic books?
Is that okay? For me, yeah, absolutely. I think there is. In fact, our business has grown over the last decade. And when I explain that to people, they get kind of shocked, because the truth is the direct market sales of our books have declined year after year for 20 years. Yeah. And but we've grown on Amazon, digital, and in a variety of the crowdfunding stuff, Kickstarter. We've raised a significant amount of money. And a lot of that's nostalgia hardcover reprints, so it's going into the library and putting out stuff from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and hopefully it comes out, and there are people that are buying it that are either hardcore fans, or there are people who are trying it for the first time, and I've come to realize that we're in a very different world now than we used to be, and people will not try things if they have to pay for it. And that's why sampling is so important. And, so unless you figure out a way to get something very inexpensively or into someone's hands to where they can try it. And this is, I don't really get into talking about piracy and the online torrents much, because it's just a quagmire, and I don't really want to have that discussion. But I've had some experiences of late where people come up to me at my booth at various conventions, and they buy $200 worth of hardcovers from me. And I'm like looking at that, and I'm like, wow, okay, cool. I'm like, how'd you find my work? And they kind of sheepishly say, Pirate Bay, or this or the other. Like, yeah. And what I've come to realize is that however someone becomes a fan of something, if they become a fan, then they want something high end. They want to explore that fandom, and we toxic fandom and all that's it's a big topic that I don't really want to get into. But
that's fine.
There's the hardcore fans will drop $50 to $100 on something. They'll come up and do X, Y, and Z. They'll get on their own feed and promote your work. There's nothing better and more satisfying as a creator than seeing someone else, especially someone you don't even know, that goes on and has their feed and is talking to their own social media network about how much they like you and their work. And what I realized early on was that if you write work that someone likes and then they meet you and they like you, they're a fan for life.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because again, we've come up through it. We've watched it. We watched the Napster era, and we're going through the torrent era. And it was painfully obvious to me a long time ago that we needed a new shift in thinking in terms of distribution of comic books, music CDs, movies, and it's amazing because basically it took a pandemic to get most of the larger houses to realize that there is a better method for distributing these things today, and to grasp these ideas of these digital distributions and stuff. It just blows my mind, because I've walked around, we have a la carte service now. That's something I wanted 20 years ago. This is something that where is my ability to take this thing and watch it and not have to worry about all this other stuff? I don't want all this other, I just want this. And it's been such a slow adoption, but it's nice to see, because I think you're right. I believe that those of us who are looking for this to embrace the new ideas of distribution are going to find ways to make themselves successful, whether it's print media, whether it's voice, whether it's movies, whatever it is. NFTs, a huge thing, because that gives an ability to creators like ourselves and comic book creators to stamp an individual digital piece of work and it's like putting 1 of 100 like we used to do here on the old comic books, and making it a collectible, and just adopting this new technology and letting people use it as they see fit, and choosing, making the choice. God, it's all about choice, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's terrific. And to go back earlier, two things you mentioned right as we were coming out of the break that I'd love to touch on. I've been a lifelong Dungeons and Dragons player. I started playing in 1979, and I've run a campaign for decades. And I've played with some of the same people, and I have one of the largest collections of miniatures, I think, in the world. So I'm a huge nerd D&D guy. I play a lot of tabletop games, and I actually credit Dungeons and Dragons and me being a game master, a dungeon master of that, Car Wars, Gamma World, Traveler, Roll Master, Champions, Villains and Vigilantes. I mean, I've run campaigns in every one of these games with groups of friends over the decades, and I love these things. And but creating the narratives and the characters, I talk about this all the time. I still create sort of what I consider to be kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons character sheet for every one of my characters. There is a D&D character sheet that exists for David Lauren.
Nice.
Because if you think about it, it talks about the background, what do they care about, what are their likes, what's their history, what's their family, what's their lineage, all these things that often when you talk to people, especially independent comic creators, about some of these things, they don't know. I've asked people all the time, like, what does your character love? What kind of TV do they watch? I use this example all the time, but if I say goodbye or I say live long and prosper, it tells you two very different things about me. You know what I mean? And I think those are important things to characterize. And I subscribe to what I call the iceberg method of writing, which Stephen King talks about in his On Writing book, which means that, 90% of the iceberg is underwater and no one ever sees it, right? That's what the author needs to know. Okay, the 10% you show above the line is what the reader reads and gets. But, you need to know all that other stuff in order to affect what that character does, what his decision-making process is, what his neuroses are, complicated. I also hate one-note villains. I've done this so many times in different series, like in Think Tank. The villain of Think Tank Volume 1 becomes a hero in Think Tank Volume 2. And ultimately, I don't want to give it away, but that's how some of that happens, and it's very easy to do if you kind of plan it out that way, because people are sometimes situationally put in situations that makes them the villain, and that may not even be what they want. And having someone that's a villain because they're ordered to be, or because there's some other reason why they're doing it, because they're forced or just compelled, or maybe they're misinformed. I mean, these are all great reasons. I personally, like I said, I talked about this online, but I didn't really read comics growing up. I was more of a sci-fi book nerd, and there just wasn't comics. I grew up on military bases, and there just weren't comics around. So I grew up on Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and Piers Anthony. These are the people I grew up on. But when I did get into comics, I kind of loved Doctor Doom, because he's the villain of Fantastic Four, but he's also the hero of Latvia. I mean, he's the benevolent dictator of this country, and his people love him. And I think about that. And I think about Putin these days, and I'm like, most of the people in his country, they love that guy. And we think of him as this dictator, horrible person. But you talk to most Russians, and I know some, and they are very supportive of Putin to my face, and tell me that we're wrong, and what we know is propaganda, this, that, and the other thing. And then secondarily, you mentioned Alan Moore and V for Vendetta and Watchmen, and that is really what kept me in comics. Because when I started in comics in '93, a lot of the early Image books, I got to be honest, they weren't to my personal taste. So I'm like, these are not really books that I liked to read. I mean, they were beautiful, and they changed the industry with the coloring and a lot of that stuff, and some of them were amazing. But it wasn't until I worked with Alan on Judgment Day and War Child, and he did Supreme for Extreme when I was with Liefeld initially, I really started getting into Alan's work. And it was From Hell that changed my life, because From Hell had in the back, it had all of his research. And that was pre-internet. There was no internet. We didn't have cell phones then. So I actually went to England, went on the Whitechapel tour, I bought the books that he referenced in the back of these, and some of these books I bought from overseas and had them shipped to me, and I had to read them. And it was what I call a deep dive. I was able to do a deep dive into sort of that whole Jack the Ripper mythology, of which I didn't really know much other than what I'd seen on TV or heard growing up. And that deep dive experience was so fulfilling for me, and it was so fascinating that I tried to recreate that in most of my projects. And so I credit Alan for that, and having worked with him for a brief period of time, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, right. Well, that's great. I can't imagine, boy, being a creator and being around creators, man. Just the differences from one to another, and being able to work with somebody like that after just years. I mean, I'm sure you're not ready for the word yet yourself personally, but I think when all the books are written for our generation, you'll be a legend. Alan Moore already is a legend. There's guys. There's that core of people. Liefeld, and God love him, McFarlane, the big splash, the superhero that can't keep some of us interested, still so important to the industry and the things that you guys have done, and you guys will eventually have that sort of that label too. And I bet there's people that come into your offices every day and are just like, I can't believe I'm standing here with Matt Hawkins, and he's about to help me produce my work. What's been more satisfying for you over the years, helping people launch their own titles and create their works, or you just prefer to sit down and create your own worlds?
Well, that's a hard choice, because I actually do really like both, because there are times when I don't feel like writing, or I don't have like any ideas, that happens, and I'm like, oh, I don't really have anything to think about right now, but I have these 4 other people that I'm working with. And I've worked with a number of really, really amazing creators. And I've had a few people that I've personally mentored, and I've seen a couple of them eclipse me, which is kind of one of those things that you're like, oh, because like Brian Hill, who I worked with on Postal, we sort of gave him his debut at Top Cow as a writer, and now he's like working on Teen Titans. He's doing a new TV show for Warner Brothers. I think he wrote the Power Rangers movie that's coming out, and I'm like, wow, this guy he blew up, and he's this huge, huge success. And, worked with Ryan Cady and Teenie Howard and Stephanie Phillips. And you see some of these people sort of blossom and go out into the industry. And that is very satisfying. So on that level, I like that, because it's almost like you're helping these people and you see them. And it's nice, because most of the people that we have helped have been very appreciative, and they still, mention us. I mean, we published Jason Aaron's first work, and a lot of people don't realize that. There's a lot of people over the years that have come in through Top Cow on the writer side. I mean, everyone knows we, found Mike Turner, Dave Finch, Billy Tan, Joe Benitez. I mean, and that's just because Mark Silvestri is such a legendary artist, and so many people just want to work with him, and and he is able to find those diamonds in the rough. And one of the great things about working with Mark is he's such a good artist, and he attracts such a talented group around us that I've been able to my entire career work with these amazing artists. You know what I mean? Which is really the advantage I have, that a lot of people talk to me about, well, how do I get into comics? How do I find artists? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's harder than you think, but really it's kind of easy for me.
Right.
And people don't want to hear that, and like, because I'm working with a number of artists. I work with Stephen Sedgwick. I work with Linda Sedgwick, Yishin Lee. I've been working with Rasan Ekadal and Isaac Goodhart and so many talented guys. I'm working on a new project with Pat Boutine and a number of different things and different people all over the world that you get to work with. And it's exciting, and it's fun, and that sort of creative rapport you have with someone. I always liken the writer-artist as kind of like a marriage. And I think writers get almost too much credit. I think it's a visual medium. The artists spend far more time with these projects than the writers. It takes me 3 or 4 days to write a comic. It takes the artist a month or 2, and so they're living with this thing far longer. And one thing I always tell up and coming writers is your main job is to write something that artist gets inspired by, and then you collaborate and you put it together. And I'm not a very rigid writer. I have often, I think that might be because I come up in the image model, and the image model is very different. It's very art centric. And so you work with artists, and frequently they'll come back with a better version of what you just did. Or like in working with Rasan and other things, they'll flip genders of characters. They'll do various things. They'll do things that I hadn't thought about, but then it suddenly becomes very important. Classic example is in Think Tank. Rasan made the general. I wrote the general, Diana Clarkson, originally as a man. And just because in my mind, I thought of a general as a man. And so he flipped it to a woman. And I saw it initially and I was like, who cares? Fine. Who gives a shit? And but then what happened is as the story evolved, I realized that part of David's failure was he had this misogynistic view. And Diana Clarkson was sort of him 30 years earlier, 30 years older than him, and grew up in this military system where being a woman was not a cool thing. And she had to overcome so many more hurdles to be relevant and to matter in that world. So by the fact that she was a woman, he sort of underestimated her. So he didn't think about the fact that she'd actually be smarter than him or be able to outmaneuver him. So his sort of misogynistic view fucked him, and that is ultimately what killed him and allowed her to sort of control and nail him in that first arc.
Right.
But, it's just a little thing like that where I think about it in hindsight. I can't imagine that character
It wouldn't have worked another way.
Not being a woman,
Yeah.
And it's just weird. And so, you work with different artists, and Swing is a book I do, and I've almost always used female artists for that because it's a book written for women.
Oh, yeah, makes sense. Yeah. We got to go into a break. We will come right back here. And unfortunately, I think we're running out of time. It's about time to wrap it up with Matt Hawkins. We'll be right back on Toward Anarchy. Such a milquetoast character. I wish he could be the Anarchy that we need. I'm showing an image. You'll get to see if you pick up the YouTube video later at some point. You'll be able to see I'm flashing a issue of Detective Comics 608, and it's the introduction of the character named Anarchy, which is this young, 14-year-old boy, something like that. And he's just this terrible milquetoast version of what an anarchist could really be. I wish they would do something more with it. Wish they could have done something more with him, which is sad to say, because we know, well, you can't see it if you look later, but there's some amazing names on the cover of that book. It's Grant, Breyfogle, and Mitchell. But that sometimes they're not. Every character is not perfect, and they can't all be great. Who's your favorite character out of every, not your own, out of any of the others? Do you have a favorite? That you would love to, if you could take the handle, just make that character?
I've always loved Batman and Conan.
Yeah,
those are my two favorites. I've had a Conan story I wrote in my head 25 years ago that someday I'll be able to tell. I've tried twice to get the Conan license, and
well, that Marvel, they're not holding the license anymore. So maybe now's your chance.
It's just too expensive for what they want. It's just too expensive, and for us, licensing has never been a big part of our model, and we haven't really needed it. I know it works for a lot of companies because they need something to get people to try out their books, period, that they can then leverage to other books. But fortunately, we have our own little mini icons like Witchblade and Darkness and Aphrodite 9 and characters that people know, been published in 57 countries around the world. So we're able to sort of pin off of those.
Think Tank movie?
More likely TV than film. It's been in development 3 times for television, and this time there's a script I actually like.
Really?
But there was a Postal script I liked when it was at Hulu, and they killed that too. So it's difficult sometimes to know what's going to work. I'm not really a film and television person. I get involved in some of these things, and I talk to writers, but I gave up. I wrote for the Power Rangers TV show in 2004 and 2005, and on Space Patrol Delta and Magic Rangers, wrote a number of episodes, and that was such an interesting and weird experience for me that I decided I would never do it again.
I was going to say, was it a good experience, or did you just not want to do it again? But yeah.
It's just, for better or for worse, comics come out for the most part. I have, like I said, I have editors and people I trust their viewpoints on, but the comics come out the way I want them. You know what I mean? And there were episodes of that show that have my name as the writer on it that they rewrote everything. Everything, and 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 it's that always makes me wonder. Sometimes we see films or TV shows and we don't like them, and we like see who wrote it, and we're like, oh, that guy's an idiot, or and I think bad thoughts about that person. I'm like, yeah, that was me, and I wrote stuff that they didn't even use. I mean, and they paid me. I got paid, and I still get royalties. What is it, 20 years later for some of that stuff?
Wow.
And so being in the Writers Guild is nice, but yeah, I think the one thing I like about comics is I found artists that I'm able to work with and have developed a good relationship with, and we're able to collaborate and develop and do great creative stuff together. The problem with film and television and a lot of things like that is they go through so many hands and so many people get involved, and studios, and all these people are involved, and ultimately what comes out might not be what was even started with. So it's just frustrating for me. It's frustrating, so. I've tried my hand at a novel once or twice. It's just hard. Novels are a lot harder for me to read because I learned how to write comics. I wasn't classically trained as a creator or a writer of any kind, and so I learned how to write comics and graphic novels, and I've always done that. And writing, I think novels is the only pure written form. If you're a writer and you want your view to be unabashed, write a novel.
Yeah, I'm a geek for the writers. Anybody who listens to the show knows this, because to take that leap to having to put down in a book, put down in words, even just a short piece of something, you have to invest so much time in it. It has to be perfect. It just has to be right. You have to use the right words, and you have to consider who it is you're talking to, and your data has to be correct, because God forbid you write something down, you put it down on a piece of paper, and you publish it, you're going to die on that hill. Boy, you better be right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm a geek for the writers, because to take that leap, I won't do it. I can sit here and run my mouth. I've done it for nearly 30 years. Just run my mouth. I can say whatever I want, and I can write it off to the moment. I don't have, oh, I misunderstood, whatever it is. Oh, I was speaking tongue in cheek. I can write it off. But if you take it, put it down in a book, you got to stand by it. So I don't know if I could ever take that leap.
Well, the one nice thing is when you have a large enough library, the ones you don't like, you can kind of bury. Like there have been a few books that I've written in my career that you will not see on my tables ever, and a couple of them I've let fall out of print on purpose. Yeah. It's just because some of it was just because I spent too much time focusing on the world, not enough time focusing on the characters. And then when you read it, it comes across very dry. I use Independence Day as an example of a spectacle of a film that's fun to watch, but there's no characters to it. And a lot of Michael Bay films come across that way to me. And so, the ones I've wrote where I feel like there's a heart, because I think we're very forgiving about plots and things like that don't make sense. If the characters are interesting, compelling, and we have that wish fulfillment, like we want to be this person, that person's very cool. I mean, I watch movies and TV show all the time where I'm like, I literally just have to turn my mind off and just watch, because I'm like, this is so silly. I watched a TV show yesterday. I was just like, this is so absurd. It was actually an episode of Law and Order. I don't ever try to shit on anything, but there was an episode of a new one, the new Stabler one, and they were dealing with the dark web and hackers, and knowing quite a bit about that stuff myself. It was hilarious to me.
It was bad. Well, I that's it, man. I told you I'd keep you for an hour, so I'll let you go. I appreciate your time so much. I really enjoyed talking with you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again.
Sounds good.
Thanks
for having me.
Thank you. That was great. I'm so glad that the conversation went that way, because I really knew that's where I wanted it to go. That was the conversation I wanted to have about the creativity, about just a lot of those things that we talk about on the show that are the underlying driving things, that idea that we should pursue those things that make us happy. It's what Dr. Dean Lloyd and I talk about all the time. Turning, if you're internalized and you're paying attention, you realize what your mind and your body and your spirit want from you and need you to work towards, then you're going to always be chasing the good things. And that creative pursuit is one of the easiest ways to do it, because it satisfies it checks off so many boxes on that need and want list to satisfy those internal. I don't know what they are. There's so many different things that can grab a person and drive a person, but there's really a short list when it comes to what you would check off in terms of, is this experience satisfactory? Is this a thing that makes me feel good and that I want to continue to do? Is it what's right for me? Is it right for my body? Is it right for my mind? I have a feeling about these things, and I have a feeling about people and ideas, and I just run with it. I just want to have that experience, and that's what talking with Matt was all about. It's wanting to have that experience, being that person. We were just talking about this at the end of the show. You didn't hear this because it happened during the break, but we're talking about this idea that I express over and over again, this idea of separating creators from the art that they produce for you, the work that they produce for you, and the way that work makes you feel. And he just said, he says, I've been disappointed by many over the years that has happened to me. That of course it has in an environment like he's found himself in for the last 30 years. There's no chance that you're not going to run into people that you think are one thing, but you find out are something else. And so it's always really nice when you do let down that barrier, open up to that conversation, to have it go the way you want it to. And that comes with practicing that conversation and understanding people, and it's a lot of what we talk about here on the show, just that ability to communicate, and that with other people, but also that ability to communicate with self, and that these things are key to freeing yourself, freeing your mind, and living in a voluntary existence, to indulge in the things that make you feel good when they're not at the sacrifice of something else that doesn't cause you yourself to sort of break and split down the middle and not be sure with what you're doing is what's right, because you're not concerned about what's right. You're concerned about what's right for you, and you're doing so in a voluntary existence. With one is almost, no good without the other. Let me get some of my coffee here. One is almost no good without the other, and so it doesn't do anybody any good if you don't practice both. It's one thing to want for yourself; it's another to want for other people, and to understand both. They have to be in balance if you want to have a voluntary existence. It's so easy. I'm making it sound so much more complicated than it might be, just because I'm trying to make an expression of it, as opposed to just say it's easy to live a voluntary existence. I'm trying to give you an idea, some kind of place marker, something that you can look at to say, all right, well, this is the attitude that I've taken towards this, and it's a positive attitude, and it's worked out well for me. We'll take that same idea, that same attitude, that same process, that same feeling, and apply them across the board to everything that you do. So that when you feel good, you understand that you feel good for the right reasons, that you feel good, you're not taking advantage of somebody else. You're feeling good because you're being successful in and of your own right, that you're doing the things that make you feel good because they're right for you. And all of that is a long way of saying, again, that we live in this. really trying to address. Hopefully what we have is this captive audience. Is because during the break you missed it, and I think I'd already pressed the stop recording button for the video too, so it's probably not going to be at the end of the video if you watch the video. But if I did wait a minute and didn't click it right away, you'll catch it. But we just had a quick conversation, and Matt said that he would share my information with some of his other creators and people that he knows. And he's like, well, I immediately have some idea of people that would, it'd be great to chat with, that would not mind, I guess, the political atmosphere that's assumed that comes with a show like this, on a network like this, in a space like this. You assume certain things about Toward Anarchy on Republic Broadcasting Network if you've never listened. You could make a whole bunch of assumptions. There's a whole bunch of words in just Toward Anarchy Republic Broadcasting Network. I mean, let's break down everything. No, we're not going to do that. So you could get a preconceived notion about what it is that you might expect or understand that you're going to hear coming out of my mouth. There's this expectation of angry white guy. I get that one a lot. I have a lot of people try to tell me that I should anarchy their way. That's kind of a funny thing. Anarchy somebody else's way, because that's not what anarchy means. It's not what anarchy is. Anarchy is just no rulers. It doesn't say anything about anything else. It doesn't speak to the intelligence of a person. It doesn't speak to the compassion or whether they understand anything other than they don't want to be ruled. You can extrapolate from that. Okay, I don't want to be ruled, therefore I don't want to rule over others. That should be a natural, something that you could pull out of that, something that you could infer out of the statement that I am an anarchist. You might be able to. So from that, you should be able to also suggest that idea of live and let live. I'll stay out of your business, you stay out of mine. That's not to say that I'm not friendly. It's just that I'm affording you the same luxury that I wish you would afford me, and that's unless I invite you in, that I want you to stay out. That's it. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. That's something you could certainly, it's in that line of thinking if you take that. And you could continue with that. There are so many other things that I personally believe and hold to be true as an anarchist that reflect an anarchist position, a legitimate connection to not wanting to be ruled and not wanting to rule over others. If you take those two basic ideas and extrapolate from there into these different realms and different ideas of thought, it sounds like something more complicated than it is, and it's not. It really is not. It's not a scary word. It's not a scary reality. Anarchy is our reality. Anarchy is where we exist every single day in every thought, every action that we conduct with ourselves, with others, without ever thinking about what authority thinks of it or what authority might say about what we're saying or doing. We do it so often that authority doesn't exist. The myriad of ideas, transactions, thoughts, actions, things that we do every single day, the collective we, all of us on the planet, are done without the need for the consideration of the opinions of an authority, particularly the authority, the state, the government. And so you're already there you already have this existence surrounding you. You already live it every single day, whether you want to believe it or not. You're an anarchist. You haven't embraced all of the ideas yet because maybe you still vote. Maybe you think that libertarianism is a path, but again, I suggest to you that that's just another statist path. That it's just changing parties within an already screwed up system, and that historically we're looking at ideas that aren't sustainable. That is, government is not sustainable because government is a big, dumb, lumbering mass of emptiness rolling over everything in front of it. It's amazing how empty it is and yet how powerful and how much it weighs as it crushes everything it rolls over. But there is no value, there's no substance to it. When you break it down in terms of economics, it is a loss. When you break it down in terms of self-defense, or defense of the state and defense of humanity and rights and everything that Americans believe that they represent and that their founding documents supposedly represent, all of these ideas are completely blown into the wind. It's tossed and gone. They don't exist. They're nothing but a facade, an illusion, when you take the totality of the actions of those that are that government or of that government itself. If you want to separate the individuals from the beast, and I suggest that you do, because the beast is its own thing. It feeds on us, and it has been ingrained so long in the ideas of who we are and what America is and what the world is. It's not just an American thing. It's the entire world under this self-delusion that because people aren't necessarily capable of managing their own lives and managing themselves around others, it's untrue. But because we can point to small instances or even larger instances of individuals who are incapable of managing their own existence, therefore, we should take a whole bunch of individuals, put them together in a collective quagmire of stupidity and easy money, and suggest that they manage things for us. It hasn't worked yet. We continue to go down the same path. We continue to lose our individual freedoms, our health, our wealth being destroyed every minute by the policies of those in charge. We spend our time, many of us, almost all of us, spend our time trying to find ways that we can avoid coming into conflict with the beast, being robbed by the beast, supporting the beast in any way, hoping that someday maybe the beast will die or at least lay down and take a damn nap for a while so some of us can catch a rest. These are all hopes and wishes and dreams. Dream bigger, build back better, hope and change. These are all slogans. Democracy itself is a slogan. It's just an idea that has yet to be realized in any true sense of what's been sold to us. The idea is that we participate and that we make changes in our democracy by participating in the vote. But that's not true. That's not how voting works. Yours is just one of many other voices, some who participate, some who don't, some who are intelligent, some who are not, some who understands what it means when you give government power and you give government control of money and banks and healthcare systems and everything else, the roads, and others who get that this is just, it's just a scam. I don't know any other way to put it. Government is a huge joke, a huge scam, a laughing stock, something that people make humorous remarks about in an attempt to. It's like whistling in the dark. You know what? Do you know that term? Are you familiar with that term? It's what people do when they're scared and they want to take their mind off of being scared. It's the same concept when you're looking at people who are voting or who are participating in the system and looking for some sort of satisfaction through it. Because it's an externality. It's something outside of you, something you can't control, but you're given this idea that you can, that you just show up to the polls, you make this meaningless, minimal effort to make change. We all know that the only way to change things around us, to change ourselves, is to actively do so, that you can't just sit there. You don't just sign a piece of paper and suggest that things are going to be better the next day. That's not how you affect change in the world, that you get up off of your butt and you go and you do something. And yet voting, we're sold that voting is going to make a change, that it's going to make some significant difference. It's kind of a silly notion to someone like me. We'll come back and we'll wrap up the show. I'll let you know who's coming up over the next couple weeks. So some fantastic shows coming up over the next few weeks. I have not confirmed with him, but Dr. Dean Lloyd will be back probably the 19th. Next week, still planned. I do believe it will happen. It's a little bit tough. He's down under, quite literally. We're going to talk to Dan. He's a targeted individual, and we'll find out what and who TIs are. And I've had some interesting conversations over the years with these individuals, these targeted individuals, and some of them are interesting characters, and so we'll find out how interesting of a character Dan is. That's planned for next week. If not, it may just be the two of us. If for some reason logistically we can't seem to make it happen, because he's sort of, it'll be the next day, early in the morning for him, and early on a Monday, no less. If we can't make that happen, it'll just be the two of us, because I think the two of us need some time alone together anyway. We haven't had any time together here recently. We've been chatting with all these wonderful people. God, I've had such great shows here recently. I always have, but I mean, just expanding that base, like I was talking about, just trying to find different people and different topics to talk about has been wonderfully successful, and I've been enjoying having these great conversations. So Dr. Dean Lloyd probably on the 19th. Like I say, I haven't confirmed with him yet, but I'm sure he won't have a problem with it. Lou Sander on the 26th. He's back on the show because it's time for Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest again, and so he's going to invite us to that and tell us about the event and what's going on at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Fest. That's great. That'd be great. I love talking with Lou. He's a neat guy. One of these just great digital friends of mine. I've never met him in person, but I've had opportunities to chat with him and talk with him about some of these things. He's just a decent guy, and I just love having these conversations with these great people, and just they're normal people, and that's what I want you to take away from all of this. There's a million things going through my mind. Trust me, with all of this happening, with the potential to reach the new audience, and knowing that there's this you listening right now, this new you, this different you, all these things that I want to just drop in there and say, and at these points and these beautiful thoughts, and but there's just not enough time for them all. So you have to come back next week, and you have to listen in on that show, and then another show. And I encourage you to try some stuff across the rest of the network, and support the network, support Republic Broadcasting Network. Go to republicbroadcasting.org, click on the shop button, click on the donate button. Either way that you do this, it helps support not just my voice. It's not about me. It's not about my one little hour a week that I get to share here, or one little show a week for 2 hours. It's about the entirety of the network, and all of the voices, and all of the truth, and all of just the wonderful people that make Republic Broadcasting a reality. So please, if you can, support it and support us and support the show, support the network. And we'll see you next week. Until then, take care.
You can't handle the truth.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit republicbroadcasting.org today, because you can handle the truth.